Darragh McKeon, bonjour.
Bonjour.
Un grand merci d'avoir accepté l'invitation de la Fringale culturelle. Nous nous rencontrons pour parler ensemble de votre premier roman, Tout ce qui est solide se dissout dans l'air, disponible en librairie aux éditions Belfond, chez nous en France depuis le 20 août. Comment est né ce roman dans votre tête?
So it's difficult to put it in one sentence or one phrase because it's a novel, and there are many influences. But I think the origin is that I'm from a town in Tullamore, where there's an Irish charity who would have brought children from Chernobyl to the region, and so when I was about 12 years old, in this very small, kind of quiet little town in Ireland, a lot of children from Chernobyl would have come and visited us, and we would hear little stories about their lives, and I became very intrigued about the situation, but really also about their day-to-day lives. There was stories about their apartments that they lived in, that and we would hear that the apartment was the size of our bathroom, an average bathroom, and they lived on the 19th floor. And in my hometown, there was no buildings more than 3 stories high. So just the idea of what these apartments looked like up in the sky I think was very important to me as a child. And then all of those years later, I began to inhabit those apartments and imagine what the lives were like inside them.
Pouvez-vous nous parler des 4 personnages de ce roman? Le petit prodige de 9 ans qui joue du piano, sa tante qui travaille dans une usine de banlieue, le chirurgien qui travaille pour oublier, lui, son mariage brisé, et l'autre jeune garçon.
Yeah, so the 4 characters in the novel, I think probably the first one to emerge was the character of Grigory, who's a surgeon who's working in Moscow, and he's taken from the Moscow region and put into Chernobyl straight after the accident happened, maybe 2 days afterwards. And I read a lot of testimony from nuclear physicists and medical experts at the time, and that's what they were faced with. They were literally taken from their day jobs, put into this situation in Chernobyl, and this kind of great nuclear disaster had never happened before. So they had no idea what to do, but they recognized the seriousness of it. And so that was I found that when you read about these people, you find them very lost at sea, like they don't really know what to do in these extreme circumstances. So he was very interesting to me. Then his wife began to emerge in the writing, and she became a dissident journalist who was sent to work in a car parts factory. And in Stalinist Russia in the 50s, if you were a dissident journalist, your life was at risk or you were put in a gulag. By the 1980s, you probably would have had to change jobs and just live a life that you didn't want to live. But that's quite crushing in its own way, and I wanted to write about that a little bit and their relationship. And then there was a character that emerged who was called Evgeny, who was a piano prodigy. And it's kind of interesting within a culture of strength that maybe a way to resist that strength is actually through lightness. And he's this piano prodigy who doesn't really know what to do with his talent. And the 4th one is a boy called Artyom, who lives in the region, very near Chernobyl. And I really wanted to write about people who lived, farmers who lived in the outlying kind of areas of the power plant. I saw a documentary, which was maybe another kind of prod for me to write this book when I was 17 or 18, about people who had returned to the farmland around Chernobyl, and that sense of how powerful land is for a farmer, and how distressing it is to be ripped away from that land. I think there's something different. There's a different experience in being taken away from an urban culture than there is from a rural culture, because if you're in a rural life, and my father's a farmer, you really get to know the rhythms of the land, and it becomes part of your life. So to be taken away from that is a very distressing thing.
Alors, le 26 avril 1986, il vient de se passer quelque chose dans la centrale de Tchernobyl. Que vouliez-vous nous raconter et raconter aux lecteurs en parlant de cette période?
Yeah, it's a very interesting period. If you start reading about the history of the mid-1980s, you can begin to, even from the reading, you can feel that there's a society beginning to tear itself. It's beginning to tear apart at the seams. Mikhail Gorbachev, who was the Russian premier at the time, he has said since he has said that Chernobyl was the beginning of the end. That was the catalyst that, you know, drew all these changes into the Soviet Empire. And you know, also on an atomic level, what happens in an accident. I read a piece from a Russian physicist who quoted H.G. Wells, who's the famous English author from the 20s and 30s. And he says that what happens on an atomic level is like the breakdown of tradition in a society. And as soon as I read that and thought about Gorbachev's comments, I realized that that's maybe my theme, and that I would probably start the book with Chernobyl and then begin to trace how that chaos emerged within the final days of the Soviet